They lied to you. Feminism didn't ruin men. This did. What exactly is it that screwed over men when it comes to the modern sort of condition, the human condition in the modern era, the so-called domestication of man, as some people are calling it? Well, that thing is called capitalism. Now, for some of you, you're going to say, well, that's so typical of a leftist to say, blah, 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 and how does it even relate to my own personal life? So, let me get into this. Basically, when we look at two theories that more or less say the same thing, we have the theory of economic determinism. Economic determinism is basically the idea that the economic relationships, whatever they may be, at the essentially the heart of any given society, and that all other relationships more or less ripple outward from the economic, if that makes sense. So that is the theory of economic determinism. Now, oddly enough, written at around the same time, Karl Marx, in his work Das Kapital, talks about historical materialism, in which he says that the dominant mode of production, that being the way that wealth is created and acquired in any given society, is essentially the driving force of said society. We have the base and we have the superstructure. So the base is the material element to any given society, the farms, the factories, etc. The superstructure is the ideas of any given society. And so that is the churches, the religions, philosophies, and so on and so forth. Now, why is this important? Because an insight that even Marx himself hadn't caught onto comes from much later, and that is Martin Louis Althusser. Martin Louis Althusser came along and said that the superstructure is subordinate to the base, meaning that the ideas, the sort of collective thought life, if you will, of a society is subordinate to the material factors that drive it. So here's an example. Capitalism, which Marx defines as the boss-worker relationship, right? It is the means, it is the mode of production. That system meant that liberal feminism and radical feminism received incredible funding from the likes of David Rockefeller, not John Rockefeller. And so that is what happened. They pumped money into it. However, there were legitimate grievances on the part of women, but these were weaponized. Why would they want that? Because they wanted more workers. That's essentially it. This is responsible for the erosion of communities, for the uprooting of culture and tradition, and so on and so forth. There is a sort of popular notion that white people don't have culture, and to a certain degree, it is true. However, they once did have culture in a sort of sense, in the sense that they had the churches and so on and so forth. And without these sort of institutions, they lost their culture. And so you could quite argue, quite logically, that the sort of white people of white-dominated societies were the first victims of capitalism. They were the ones whose culture was killed first. And so this is something to take into account, and it is why the majority of people today that identify as incels, red pill, and so on and so forth tend to be white men. Why is that? Because, as Martin Jacques Lacan got into, gender, whether you think it ought to be biological or not, has a performative element to it. And the performative element man does this, woman does this, right, was uplifted and uprooted by the forces of capitalism. Because previously, what had defined a man and what had defined a woman was essentially man works, woman raises child. And this was uplifted, this was done away with. And so we're in a situation where men don't know how to interact with women. Because in a sense, they're not women anymore. And so that is the situation that you find yourself in as a result of capitalism. Capitalism alienates the very subject that keeps it going. And this subject defends it. Think about it. How many people online defend capitalism and yet themselves have negative $5 in the bank? It's remarkable. It is perhaps the ultimate grift.